This is East Asia Tonight.
Good evening, I'm Otelli Edwards. Tonight's top stories from East Asia. South Korea and the U.S. finalize a new defense and trade deal featuring closer cooperation on nuclear-powered submarines and billions of dollars of investments into America. China steps up its warning in a week-long spat, telling Japan it would suffer a crushing defeat if it intervened over Taiwan after Beijing summoned Tokyo's ambassador over remarks by Prime Minister Takaichi. Also tonight, Chinese astronauts back on Earth after a 9-day delay, returning on a different capsule after tiny window cracks, likely from space debris, were found in the original spacecraft. And more signs of weakness in the Chinese economy, with the biggest monthly decline in investment since COVID. Ahead on the bulletin, China's desert turning green with technology. From drones sowing life to a solar Great Wall powering the future. We look at China's fight against desertification. Plus, they are breaking Japan's beauty standards one flex at a time. Meet the Muscle Girls as they redefine power and sisterhood at a fitness-themed bar in Tokyo. South Korea's President Lee Jae-myung has unveiled details of the defense and trade deal secured with his U.S. counterpart Donald Trump 2 weeks ago on the sidelines of the APEC summit in Gyeongju. Key points of the deal include Washington's authorization for Seoul to build nuclear-powered attack submarines. President Lee told reporters the security consultations had been the biggest variable in the talks. Now, on the economic front, South Korea will invest $150 billion in the U.S. shipbuilding industry and commit a further $200 billion under a memorandum of understanding. The partnership also includes a joint program on artificial intelligence. Well, Friday's announcement concludes months of negotiations, and it's aimed to tighten the partners' industrial and military ties amid rising regional tensions. Now, the agreement also lowers U.S. tariffs on South Korean goods, including cars and auto parts, to 15% from 25%. For more on this, CNA senior correspondent Lim Yoon-suk joins us live from Seoul. Yoon-suk, what do we know so far about the U.S.-South Korea submarine deal?
Well, it is written clearly in the joint fact sheet released by both the White House and the presidential office here that, this is the first time this has ever appeared in an official bilateral document. And this fact sheet also confirms that Washington will be working with South Korea on the most sensitive part of this program, and that is the nuclear fuel. Now, the United States has agreed to cooperate on the fuel supply options and, more broadly has endorsed South Korea's push to expand its rights to enrich uranium and the reprocessing of spent fuel. Without that, a nuclear submarine program would not be possible. But right now, looking at that statement, it is still very unclear as to how many tons of uranium South Korea will be allowed to enrich. And so we will be looking out for details on that. And also as to where this submarine is going to be built, South Koreans have clearly said that this entire discussion between the two leaders, the U.S. President Donald Trump and South Korean President Lee Jae-myung, was on the assumption that this submarine will be constructed here in South Korea and not the United States. But the fact sheet does not say exactly where it is going to be built, and so that's something that we will have to watch out for. Also, we are unsure of the timeline. There's no construction schedule yet because issues like the technical design, the fuel arrangements, and especially the security clearances will all have to be negotiated before the construction can actually go ahead. And South Korea here is saying that it could take years before the first one is ready. And so, although this green light has been given, it looks like we'll have to keep an eye out for all those details and the exact roadmap.
So in the meantime, what about the reaction at home to all the details of today's fact sheet?
Well, the initial reaction here in South Korea is mixed. I mean, there's certainly, a sense of relief that the two countries have finally got this document together and something that they agree on. But, we're also getting new details, including that 15% tariff on automobiles will be retroactive to November 1st after the agreement is finalized. And once this 350 billion US dollar Korean investment package is submitted to Parliament this month. And that is very important because automobiles are one of South Korea's, biggest exports to the United States. Now, the Korean Automobile Association has welcomed this deal, saying that the completion of this fact sheet was a great relief and a very positive development for South Korea's auto industry. We have the ruling Democratic Party also welcoming this, calling this a historic deal and saying that, this was more than just a trade agreement. Let's hear what the Democratic Party had to say.
이는 한미 동맹을 안보, 경제, 첨단 기술을 포괄하는 미래형 전략 동맹으로 격상시킨 역사적 전환점입니다. 조선, 원전 같은 전통 산업부터 인공지능, 반도체 등 첨단 산업까지 이전과는 차원이 다른 협력이 펼쳐질 것입니다.
Meanwhile, we have on the other side the main opposition, People Power Party, expressing concerns about the scale of this commitment, especially the 350 billion US dollar investment plan, saying that they will have to examine the details very closely first. The party has also raised concerns about the auto sector, saying that, while this 15% tariff now puts South Korea in the same level as Japan, it is still high since South Korea enjoyed no tariffs under the bilateral free trade agreement since 2016, while Japanese cars at the same time were, facing a 2.5% tariff. So, overall, yes, there is this sign of relief here, but also a sign of caution. And it's very likely that we'll see this debate ongoing over the size and impact of South Korea's commitment.
Many thanks for that report. Lim Yun-suk there live from Seoul. Meantime, China has warned Japan that it will suffer a crushing defeat should it ever try to use force to intervene over Taiwan. This follows Beijing's summoning of Japan's ambassador today over leader Sanae Takaichi's earlier comments on the island.
日方若不深刻汲取历史教训，胆敢铤而走险，甚至武力介入台海局势，必将在中国人民解放军的铜墙铁壁面前碰得头破血流，付出惨痛代价。
Japan has urged China to respond appropriately, reiterating that it had explained the intent behind Ms. Takaichi's remarks. Tokyo says its position on the island remains unchanged.
台湾海峡の平和と安定、これは日本の安全保障はもとより国際社会の安定にとっても重要であり、台湾をめぐる問題が対話により平和的に解決されることを期待するというのが我が国政府の一貫した立場であります。
Now, the spat, which has lasted for a week, was sparked by Ms. Takaichi's suggestion that if China attacked Taiwan and a cross-strait conflict ensues, Japan could respond and deploy its military. Beijing previously issued a warning that any Japanese involvement in the Taiwan Strait would be perceived as an act of aggression. Both sides have lodged serious protests, with some exchanges getting heated. China's consul general in Osaka made a comment that some have interpreted as a threat against Ms. Takaichi. Now, a post with a CCTV-affiliated social media account labeled Ms. Takaichi a troublemaker and warned that she would have to pay the price if she continues to make such comments. Well, senior officials in Tokyo have since called for China's consul general in Osaka be expelled from Japan. Japan's foreign minister called the comments regrettable and urged the Chinese side to take appropriate action. Ms. Takaichi has refused to retract her remarks on Taiwan, insisting that it's consistent with her government's traditional position. But she has since said that she would be more careful when commenting on specific issues. Well, CNA also spoke with Seijiro Takashita, professor of management and information at the University of Shizuoka, and he noted that economic ties with China are important for Japan and weighed in on how Beijing might retaliate in this worsening diplomatic spat.
I think it is damage control because we know that the Chinese authorities may retaliate, in several ways, which is unthinkable under a democratic world, such as, for example, prisoning, some civilians in China, or putting unnecessary pressure on economic terms on some issues, particularly like rare earth metal. All these kind of cards that they can use on economic issues, which you shouldn't use when you have political glut. But they are very, eloquent in using those cards. Which is, in my opinion, very unlawful, and the reason why people cannot trust China. But, they will possibly use that card, and I think our prime minister knows that. So she's trying to, I think, simmer down the flare that is happening between the two countries. I think it regresses back to a lot of things that many of the free world nations were trying to do, especially after COVID-19, which is to lower the interdependency towards China, particularly in global, supply chain. But of course, that's not going to happen overnight. It will take time, and that's one of the reasons why I think our prime minister do not want to flare this up and basically simmer things down. Because, economic-wise, Japan and China is still very hot. Political-wise, it's very cold. But, we'd like to sustain, a very good relationship on the economic terms continuously.
China, meantime, says that it's seriously concerned about Japan's military and security moves, including what Beijing described as ambiguity over Tokyo's non-nuclear principles.
日本自我标榜为和平国家，宣扬建立无核武器世界，但高市政权却对无核三原则表态模糊，语言不详，暗示有可能放弃。 日方高官甚至声称不排除引进核潜艇，这些都充分暴露了日方政策的重大负面转向，向国际社会释放出危险信号。
The Japanese Prime Minister Takaichi on Monday hinted at a possible shift in her country's decades-old non-nuclear principles. It raised speculation that she could revise a long-standing ban on allowing nuclear weapons to be brought into Japan. Our break's up next, but coming up on East Asia tonight, Japan's largest banks raising their annual profit forecasts as they cash in on a long-awaited rise in interest rates. Listed companies in Japan offering early retirement packages as they try to renew the staff ranks. Hello again. Good to have your company on East Asia tonight. We are just in time for some business news with Olivia Marzuki. And today we're talking about China's economic indicators painting somewhat of an overcast outlook for growth in October. Tell us more about that.
Well, I'll tell you, it is showing sluggishness in both consumer and also industrial sectors. And this is going to put pressure on the government to step up and also meet their growth target for this year of about 5%. China's economic engine is easing off the throttle going into the final quarter. New October data show that factory output losing pace after September's pre-Golden Week holiday rush. On the high street, shoppers are still keeping their wallets closed. Retail sales rose just 2.9%, the slowest in 5 months. And investment is stalling as well. Fixed asset spending has slipped again, dragged down by a deeper slide in the property sector as new home prices keep falling. A glimmer of good news, though, the urban jobless rate edged down to 5.1%. But headwinds are blowing. Exports unexpectedly contracted, and credit growth is at a 13-month low. Both firms and households are reluctant to borrow while the property crunch lingers. And to help us cut through the numbers, we have Gary Ng, senior economist at Natixis, joining us live from Hong Kong. Gary, happy Friday to you. You're sensing some signs of stress, though, given today's real economy numbers and also yesterday's credit data out of China. Is the 5% GDP target then still on the cards for this year?
Well, yes, indeed. If you look at what happened in the financial data, we do see that household and corporate, they're quite unwilling to leverage, which basically means that they're not too confident about the future. And together with what we have seen today, with this broad deceleration, whether it's in retail sales, industrial production, and also investment, it basically shows that the Chinese economy is indeed facing greater pressure at this moment. But having said that, because we do see that the performance of the economy has been relatively resilient in the past 2 to 3 quarters, which basically means that even though we see some weakening signs in the last few months of 2025, it won't change the fact that China will be able to reach the 5% growth target. But it will mean that in Q4, growth may decelerate to 4.5%. The real challenge is probably in next year.
All right, Gary. So the weak credit demand among Chinese banks, you said, mirrors the real economy. That's even after Beijing's stimulus support. So what exactly is the clog in policy transmission?
Well, indeed, we do see some positive sign in using the fiscal stimulus to support growth and through infrastructure or certain long-term projects. But it is really not enough to boost the confidence in whether this can actually push companies or households to borrow more money to consume and also invest. So to me, this is really the biggest problem as we see, because China is losing nominal growth. Real growth may be around 5%, but nominal growth compared to, let's say, 5 years ago, it has dropped from 10% to 5%. So I think this is really the main reason for the weakness in the confidence. So for China to really regain the economic momentum, it will need to regain the price growth.
Your base case scenario for the ailing property sector, your note says you see no end or recovery in sight. What would confirm a housing market bottom, and what would spur a turnaround?
Well, I would say that China will probably need to consider lowering interest rate further and by a much larger margin to really stimulate the demand and lower the cost for households to buy homes. But of course, at this moment, policymakers may have other consideration, other priorities. So this is not going to happen, I would say, in the very short run. So what we see so far is that transaction hasn't really picked up that frequently. For Tier 1 city, maybe doing slightly better. But if you look at the smaller cities, like in Tier 2, Tier 3, the inventories are still massive. It will take time to digest all of it. I think this is why in the most likely scenario, L-shaped recovery is already a very, very good scenario in the next couple of years. Prices is probably quite hard to rebound. And for investment, it will take even longer term to actually see any meaningful recovery.
And as far as meaningful recovery goes, you see a better recovery and investor sentiment in the equity market, right? But you said it's not big enough to have any impact on the real economy. My question is the stock market rebound even sustainable?
Well, I would say one of the biggest changes that we see this year is that banks are allowed to really lower the deposit rate in a much larger margin. So this has actually pushed some of the household saving towards fund or towards equity investment directly. So I think this, to me, is at least a more effective policy in really pushing the money into the financial market. But of course, whether we see a very big improvement in confidence, I think we're still quite far from there, because if you look at the time deposit ratio, a lot of households, despite the lower deposit rate, they still prefer to have their money kept in banks. They don't really want to consume. So I think this remains a very, very big challenge for China. So even if we look at some breakdown in retail sales data, one of the components that actually stand out is jewelry, which basically means gold purchase. It reflects the fact that households are actually seeking other ways of the safe haven.
All right. So are we bound to see more policy support then, given the broad-based softness going forward?
I would say that it's possible to see more support, especially from the fiscal side. So I think this is really what the Chinese government is trying to do, especially from the central level in coordinating much larger national level infrastructure projects. And at the same time, as the pressure kicks in, I would say that probably early next year, we will start to see more liquidity injection because China needs the banking sector to support all this government debt to support growth. But for interest rate, it really depends on how worse the situation go. But if the dollar actually weaken further, I would say the authority will see a further pressure in maintaining a stable RMB. So there could be a 20 basis point cut in interest rate. But this may not really fully enough to basically support Chinese economy in a very strong V-shaped recovery. It's possible to see still a deceleration towards 4.8% next year.
All right. Gary, thanks for your insight today. Our last business day of the week. Gary Ng there, senior economist from Natixis, live from Hong Kong. We're seeing another worrying sign for China's property sector, with more than $1 billion worth of loan reportedly at risk of default. Bloomberg reports that Hong Kong developer Parkview Group has a $940 million loan due today. The developer is looking for an extension of up to a year. The Taiwanese lender Bank of Panshin has yet to approve a rollover on part of the loans as of yesterday. In another case, a private equity fund, Gaw Capital, missed the deadline on a $260 million loan on a Shanghai tower this week, putting it at risk of default, which creditors can declare within a day if they want to. Banks are feeling the strain from the property slump and are looking to reduce their exposure. Last year, distressed sales of Chinese commercial real estate accounted for more than a fifth of total transactions. Lenders UOB and HSBC have recently set aside hundreds of millions of dollars in anticipation of losses in the Greater China property market. Japan's mega banks have submitted their quarterly report cards, a strong showing as the lenders cash in on a rise in interest rates and a buzz of corporate activity. Net revenue for MUFG coming in over $10 billion, up more than 15% in the September quarter on year. While number two, SMFG Group, up nearly a fifth over the same period, over $8 billion. And Mizuho Financial coming in just under $6 billion, a 12.6% jump. Japan's largest lender is also notching jumps in profits, with SMFG recording the largest at nearly 60%, following by Mizuho at just over 45%, MUFG up more than 7% with just over $5 billion. Now, the results leading the lenders to raise their profit forecasts for the year. MUFG at more than $13 billion, SMFG just under $10 billion, and Mizuho $7.5 billion. Japan's financial sector is seeing a buzz in corporate activity as companies continue to plan merger and also acquisitions, boosting demand for loans. Now, the country's mega banks have proven resilient to the economic uncertainty wrought by Trump's return to the White House, and their performance have outstripped the wider topics index over the past 2 years. Early retirement from Japanese listed firms is hitting a 4-year high, and that's as firms are moving to reorganize their workforce to reduce costs associated with older workers. It is a trend which moves away from the once sacred model of lifetime employment and threatens to place more load on social services in the country. More than 11,000 employees at major publicly listed firms have been offered voluntary or early retirement from January to early November. That is according to Tokyo Shoko Research. That includes well-known names, including Panasonic and Japan Display. Even profitable companies like Mitsubishi Electric, Meiji Holdings, and Olympus are streamlining to stay competitive in a tight labor market. The packages for early retirement target those in their 50s, and the Tokyo Chamber of Commerce and Industry say that this is a measure to improve the mobility of mid-career workers to maintain competitiveness. pressure from investors and regulators is mounting, pushing firms to cut costs and improve returns, even as Japan redefines what it looks like in an aging society. So that story wraps up the business news for today. Otelli, back to you.
Thanks so very much for that, Olivia. On that note, we're going to zip out for a short break, but coming up next on East Asia tonight, China's next-generation amphibious assault ship, capable of launching drones, sets sail for its maiden sea trial. And China condemns a potential U.S. arms sale to Taiwan. Hello there, this is East Asia Tonight, and here are the headlines you're following. South Korea's Lee Jae-myung unveils details of a new defense and trade deal with the U.S., featuring closer cooperation on nuclear-powered submarines, billions of dollars of investments into America. China steps up its warning in a week-long spat with Japan, telling Tokyo it could suffer a crushing defeat should it intervene over Taiwan. Beijing also summoning Japan's ambassador over remarks made by Prime Minister Takaichi. Chinese astronauts make a safe return to Earth after a 9-day delay, after the vessel they were originally slated to board sustained damage from space debris. China's largest amphibious assault ship has set sail from Shanghai for its maiden sea trial following its launch last December. The CNS Sichuan is the first drone-carrying Type 076 and is equipped with electromagnetic catapult and arresting gears. The new generation vessel is seen as a key asset for the Chinese Navy's unmanned aerial vehicle operations. It's also often described as the world's first drone carrier. The maiden trial will focus on testing the reliability and stability of the ship's power, electrical and other systems. The start of sea trials marks a milestone for the Navy, which is expected to take delivery of the Sichuan by the end of next year. The U.S. says it approved a $330 million arms sale to Taiwan, marking the first transaction since President Donald Trump took office in January. China's foreign ministry has condemned the move, saying it grossly violates the One China policy.
中方敦促美方恪守一个中国原则和中美3个联合公报，将美国领导人就涉台问题所作承诺落到实处，停止纵容支持台独势力以武谋独，以实际行动维护中美关系和台海和平稳定大局。中方将采取一切必要措施，坚定捍卫国家主权、安全和领土完整。
The Pentagon says the provision of arms would allow Taiwan to strengthen its ability to counter current and future threats by maintaining operational readiness of its fleet. Taiwan's defense ministry has thanked Washington, saying it expected the sales to take effect within a month. It says the equipment will boost defense readiness, enhancing its ability to respond to China's regular missions into nearby waters and skies. Now, Beijing claims Taiwan is part of its territory and has not ruled out using force to bring it under its control. The U.S. does not recognize Taiwan's claim to statehood. It's bounded by law to provide the island with a means to defend itself. Washington has kept unofficial ties with Taipei, remaining its most important arms supplier. Now, Pyongyang has denounced a recent call by G7 countries for the complete denuclearization of North Korea. According to a state-run KCNA, the country's foreign minister, Cho Sun-hui, called G7 statement a, quote, disguised hostile act, and that it had ignored the country's constitution, which enshrines the growth of Pyongyang's nuclear arsenal. Ms. Cho added that nuclear arms deterrence in the current geopolitical environment is the most correct option. Well, neighboring countries such as South Korea and Japan regularly call for the denuclearization of North Korea amid Pyongyang's efforts to seek international recognition as a nuclear state after declaring itself as such in 2022. In October, U.S. President Donald Trump called North Korea, quote, sort of a nuclear power when he was asked whether he was open to Pyongyang's demand to be recognized as a nuclear state as a precondition for dialogue with Washington. Chinese President Xi Jinping has pledged greater cooperation with Thailand as he met King Maha Vajiralongkorn in Beijing today. This is the first state visit by a reigning Thai monarch to China since bilateral ties were established 50 years ago. Beijing rolled out the red carpet with a welcome ceremony held at the Great Hall of the People and a 21-gun salute fired at Tiananmen Square. China is the first major country King Vajiralongkorn has visited officially since taking the throne in 2016. Mr. Xi described China and Thailand as truly good relatives, friends and partners. He also said that China is willing to strengthen strategic alignment with Thailand, steadily advance major projects like the China-Thailand Railway, and expand imports of high-quality Thai agricultural products. The Chinese leader added that both sides should broaden cooperation in areas like artificial intelligence, the digital economy, and aerospace. King Vajiralongkorn said that Thailand is willing to actively learn from China's development, as well as expand cooperation with China in all fields. 3 Chinese astronauts on board the Shenzhou 20 have returned safely to Earth in a different vessel after being stranded for more than a week in their damaged spacecraft. This was a moment of impact by the return capsule, sending up a large cloud of dust in the barren landscape. The capsule touched down at a remote site in northern China's Gobi Desert, 5.5 hours after leaving Tiangong Space Station. On board were astronauts Chen Dong, Chen Zhongrui, and Wang Jie, who were originally scheduled to return 9 days ago after completing a 6-month mission. But space debris struck their vessel last week, causing tiny cracks in a window that made it unsafe for landing. Every Shenzhou mission ends with a handover, and the trio had boarded the arriving crew's spacecraft Shenzhou 21 for their return, with Shenzhou 20 staying in orbit to conduct experiments. 5 Chinese tourists were killed and 8 others injured in the Indonesian resort island of Bali after the minibus they were in sped out of control and crashed. The driver, who did not need treatment, has been arrested. Well, the incident took place this morning. The group was on its way to the northern region of Balailing from the city of Denpasar. The minibus was traveling on a winding downhill road when it veered off the path into a garden and struck a tree. Now, Japan is looking to enlist retired police officers and soldiers to fight bears amid a spike in injuries and deadly encounters. There has been a steady stream of reports of bears entering homes, roaming near schools, and rampaging in supermarkets in areas across northeastern Japan, including Iwate and Akita prefectures. Now, Chief Cabinet Secretary Minoru Kihara announced that a policy package has been approved to recruit those with experience in handling guns to join efforts to cull the animals. Well, this is on top of active duty troops providing support, such as in the transporting of traps and captured bears. The subsidies for municipalities to tackle bears, as well as funds for culling them in springtime following their hibernation, are also included in the policy package. Well, new rules allowing police to shoot and kill bears using rifles took effect yesterday. A rapid change in Japan's strict gun laws comes as bear attacks killed 13 people since April, the highest toll on record. China is turning to technology in its fight against desertification, using drones to seed trees and with sprawling solar farms across the ice sands. Our correspondent Han Se-hui visited China's Inner Mongolia region to look into the country's wider climate ambitions.
It's a striking sight, referred to as the Solar Great Wall. Stretching 400 kilometers, this mega project in China's north is poised to become one of the largest solar power installations in the world. Construction began in Inner Mongolia's Ordo City last year and is set to be completed by 2030. The site to supply clean power to capital Beijing and its surrounding area.
一方面是广袤的土地资源，我们可以集中连片建设这么大型的光伏基地。另一方面呢，就是我们这儿的光照市场， 年有效光照时长为1987小时，就是近2000小时嘛。
The structure also serves another purpose. Installed solar panels stabilize the sand and provide a shield from the wind, creating optimal conditions for shrubs to grow. It's also part of a broader strategy to prevent land degradation in China's arid north, caused by water shortages and human activities.
经过3-4年时间甚至更长一点时间，等到它真正植物把根扎深之后，它可以自己存活了。
China's battle to hold back its desert has been going on for decades. But new technology has intensified efforts in recent years. These drones scatter grass seeds, reducing the need for back-breaking manual planting.
Now, the working conditions here in the desert is extremely harsh. As you can tell, the sand is very soft, and the wind can be extremely strong, blowing the sands into the faces of these workers.
As of last year, more than half of the country's desertified land has been reforested or stabilized. China is also the first in the world to achieve zero net land degradation, even reducing areas that have been desertified. The country's green efforts have been in the spotlight as the U.S. has rolled back climate policy under the Trump administration.
I would say China will be the global leader in sustainability by design or even by default. And I think it is actually gel very well with the combination of their domestic policy as well as their international commitment.
In September, ahead of the COP30 meeting in Brazil, President Xi Jinping announced China would cut greenhouse gas emissions by 7 to 10% by 2035, the first absolute emissions reduction target for the country. He also committed to increase China's use of cleaner fuels and expand its installed wind and solar power capacity.
This must be coupled with real action in raising, say, the share of non-fossil fuel in the energy mix, including coal. I think going forward, they need to coordinate with probably other countries to invigorate the voluntary carbon markets. And of course, China will need to participate in the Paris Agreement carbon markets, which was finalized last year for the Article 6 of the Paris Agreement. So in other words, what I feel is sometimes China tends to under-promise and over-deliver.
Still, observers note there could be spillover benefits for other countries. Green development continues to be in focus in China's latest 5-year social and economic roadmap. As officials said, the country intends to strengthen international collaboration on green technology. Tan Si-hui, CNA, Ordos, China.
5 South Korean farmers across the country have sued state power utility KEPCO and its subsidiaries, alleging that their reliance on fossil fuels has accelerated climate change and caused damage to crops. Now, the lawsuit is the first of its kind in South Korea, underscoring the challenges that the country faces as it transitions to clean energy.
몇 년 전부터 이런 기후위기나 기상변화가 온실가스 때문에 그렇다고 하는 거고, 온실가스를 가장 많이 내뿜는 것이 발전소이기 때문에 그러면은 맨날 기후위기의 손해는 농민만 보는 거냐. 농민들이 뭐 잘못한 것도 없는데 그러면은 이 원인을 일으키는 곳에 저희들이 뭔가 요구를 해야 되는 게 아닌가라는 생각을 갖고 있었습니다.
2024 was South Korea's hottest year on record, triggering a series of so-called agricultural disasters of heavy summer rains that destroyed thousands of hectares of cropland. Well, the case put forward states that KEPCO should bear some blame for extreme weather events last year, citing the firm's alleged excessive carbon emissions and its lagging transition to renewable energy. Based on the lawyer's analysis of publicly available data, KEPCO and its subsidiaries produced about 30% of South Korea's greenhouse gas emissions from 2011 to 2022.
그래서 재산적 손해로 일단 그래서 500만 원을 먼저 청구를 하게 되었고, 저희가 재산적 손해로 보고 있는 이 금액은 이제 한 전체 그 농업인분들이 전체적으로 기후위기로 받은 피해에서 0.4%만을 청구를 하고자 합니다. 네, 그 이유는 이제 한전이 전 세계 온실가스 배출에서 누적적으로 0.4%의 책임이 있기 때문에 이제 기후변화에 0.4%의 책임은 있어서 이제 농업인분들의 피해에 대해서도 그 0.4%만큼은 책임을 져라.
KEPCO told the Associated Press that it considers carbon reduction a key responsibility, but declined to comment further, saying it, quote, cannot share information that could influence the verdict. Our break's up next, but coming up on East Asia tonight, China in pole position in the battery race compared with the US, the critical technology for the modern economy. A key component to the green transition, batteries. Well, they power everything from drones and heavy machinery. But this is a race that China leads and America lags by at least a decade. Ara Spitzer files this report for CNA.
In Silicon Valley, companies like the lithium-ion battery maker Amprius are hard at work trying to design and build better batteries.
It's in every component that moves. The world needs better batteries, and we are at the forefront of that.
Here in Fremont, California, Amprius designs their lithium-ion batteries with silicon anodes used for applications like drones, where lighter batteries can double flight times. Here, they operate a pilot line to build and refine new products.
This is the entrance to Amprius's cell assembly area, where special gear is required to avoid contamination. This is where processes like stacking and electrolyte fill take place.
Those electrolytes are what allow ions to pass between the battery terminals, enabling conductivity. But as with many American battery makers, high-volume manufacturing happens abroad in places like South Korea and China. China remains the dominant force in the battery supply chain, the result of a decades-long push by the government.
China is, I would say, around 10 years ahead of Europe and North America in terms of developing those battery supply chains and EV production.
China's advantage extends from mineral refining to battery cell assembly. That's raised major strategic concerns in Washington, especially in the wake of Beijing's moves to restrict rare earth exports.
They really dominate the supply chain end to end. So you can think about upstream materials, raw materials or processed materials like graphite, for instance, that go into batteries. That's dominated by China. You can also think about downstream manufacturing, cells, packs, the electric vehicles themselves that the batteries are going into. China is the dominant player on those as well.
Even as the Trump administration has dialed back support for clean energy initiatives in the U.S., electric vehicles continue to drive up demand. The need for more renewable energy storage is also heating up.
Energy storage is becoming more and more important. And it makes sense because grid storage is going to depend on battery storage, and not only at the grid level, but also at the home level.
Advancements in battery technology mean they're continually getting cheaper to produce.
Costs have come down on an amazing basis. It's something like $100 a kilowatt hour today, sometimes 50, sometimes 150, depending on the actual chemistry. But that number was 10, maybe even 100 times higher.
But analysts say keeping pace with China will require major investment as well as demand for American-made batteries.
China is the most dominant player, but the U.S. still has a couple hundred gigawatt hours of battery capacity, and it's doubled its manufacturing capacity for batteries from 2022 to 2024.
Batteries are a key part of negotiations at COP30 in Brazil as a critical element to modernizing power grids, enabling the shift to renewables and highlighting the need for capital investment.
I like to think of them as the point guard or the utility player of the transition. Their job is to make everyone else look good or perform better.
COP30 is likely to show how central storage has become to climate ambition and how much of a leap is still needed for the U.S. to win this storage war. For CNA, I'm Ira Spitzer in Fremont, California.
Myanmar's electricity supply has deteriorated since the 2021 coup and the ensuing civil war. An AFP report on the power crisis notes that when Thailand cut power supply to Myanmar's western border to curb scam centers, it also impacted the broader community. Shops, restaurants, and even schools and homes are looking to solar power for their needs. Chinese customs data showed that for the first 9 months of this year, Myanmar imported some $100 million worth of solar panels. China is the country's largest supplier, with shipments raising 8-fold compared to pre-pandemic levels. Myanmar's surging imports mirror a trend seen in countries such as Pakistan, Sri Lanka, and Afghanistan, where solar adoption can be key to escaping erratic power supply. They're among the fastest growing markets for Chinese panel makers. Beijing earlier this month said that green trade, which includes clean energy tech, has been set as a priority area for international cooperation. It stressed that the energy transition towards cleaner sources will be an important growth engine for the global economy. And for more on sustainability and climate change, do log on to cna.asia or our mobile app for stories such as this one on $300 million being put into developing life-saving solutions at COP30 as global temperatures rise. Now, just before we go, a lot of visitors to Japan say the same thing. The women are so thin, and that is no illusion. Japan has the highest share of underweight adult women among developed nations, about 9%, according to the OECD. But one underground bar in Tokyo is crushing that image, literally. Of Muscle Girls, Japan's only female fitness-themed bar, where about 30 women who love workouts and bodybuilding entertain customers with strength and swagger. Since opening in 2020, Muscle Girls has drawn about 100 customers a day. While mainstream Japan still idolizes small and slim, Tokyo's Muscle Girls are rewriting what beauty looks like.
でもこれは多分日本の女の子10代でみんな経験してると思います。雑誌を見て SNS を見てこの人より太い私はダメ。これはすごいマインドコントロールされ多分セルフマインドコントロールされちゃってる気がします。そう細いのが可愛い。これはね本当に呪縛。
Well, at Muscle Girls, it's not just about the workouts, it's also about sisterhood. Well, the women trade diet and training tips, push each other to lift heavier, and even spend their days off together, often at all-you-can-eat buffets.
そもそもトレーニングをしていること自体が日本人の女の子の中で普通から少し外れてる人たちなんですよね。でその普通からちょっとだけ外れた人たちが集まるコミュニティだから私もそうだしみんなそう思ってくれてると思うんですけどあのお店は自分たちの大事な居場所だと思ってくれてると思います。
For about 6,000 yen or about $40 you can get 80 minutes of all-you-can-eat, a drink fun rather, a protein cocktail, and even a mini workout. And for those seeking a little extra adrenaline, there are add-ons like being slapped across the face or hoisted up by the thighs. Well, I hope you've enjoyed Friday's edition of East Asia tonight. Don't forget your headlines anytime at cna.asia. Thanks for watching and have a great weekend.